Welcome to the Asset Revolution podcast, where each week your hosts from Arbor Digital provide educational opportunities for financial advisors and individual investors to gain knowledge in this emerging powerhouse that is digital asset investing. The Asset Revolution podcast is your connection to the future of digital assets and an opportunity for anyone to get off zero. Let's dive in. All right, everybody, welcome back to the next edition of Asset Revolution, where I am joined by my business partner, colleague, friend, Matt Koleski of Arbor Capital, and we're going to jam. This is part of a three-part series specifically focusing on education and certificate or designation programs within digital assets right now that are available to advisors. So part one, we're going to go over the first program that we went through, which is called the DAC FP program, actually formerly RIA-DAC. And I know that's a mouthful, but it stands for Digital Assets Council for Financial Professionals. Whew, I did it.
You got it out.
I did. And then the second part will focus on the CDAA designation, which is the Certified Digital Asset Advisor designation. And then part three, we'll do a bit of a comparative analysis at the beginning of that part, but then we're going to dive into some free education resources and other outside of those programs that were integral to our learning and our establishment of our SMA product. So we're hoping that at the end of this three-part series, that if you're asking yourself, where do I go for continuous education and where do I go to get disciplined resources that aren't all about hype, you're going to be able to answer that question. So strap in. We've got 3 episodes. And the first one we're kicking off with, Matt, this is your first time on the podcast as well, which again, as my partner, you'd think we'd have you on before, but what took you so long?
I know, Mark. Well, you had a lot of really, really good guests that had probably really important things to say, but I'm happy to be here. This is exciting to see the podcast grow and evolve. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to this because, you talk about a lot, right? Education is kind of fundamental to what we're trying to do here. And this 3-part series is all about education and resources that are available for people. So yeah, I'm excited to get started.
All right, well, let's do it. Well, again, for those of you who don't know who Matt is, Matt, please tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Yeah, my name is Matt Koleski. I'm originally from Anchorage, Alaska, if you didn't know that. Live in Houston, Texas right now. President of Arbor Capital, and probably one of the more important roles that I play is I'm also the Chief Compliance Officer for Arbor and for Arbor Digital. So that takes up a lot of time and took a lot of time to do all the work to launch Arbor Digital. But yeah, so that's a little bit about me. I help run the portfolio, obviously, with Mark and with Kirby and some of the other folks here at Arbor. So
yeah. Thank you, Matt. And then you're still a practicing financial advisor, correct?
I am. Yes, I have my own advisory clients, traditional and digital. And so driving at that intersection of how to incorporate and how much to incorporate, right? We've been having these discussions here at Arbor for a number of years now. And to see the education systems and programs get developed around that is just makes me really excited because I felt like we were definitely out alone in the wilderness for a while. And now that there's resources available for us and for other advisors that are curious about the space, it's exciting.
Oh, yeah. And episode 3, we're going to dive into a little bit of the non-designation or certificate programs that we started off with before these 2 programs, DAC FP and CDA, were available. Because yeah, Matt, you've been in the space for a long time. I know I got into the space before these programs were available. So there was a lot of education that had to happen before that and before the launching of Arbor Digital's SMA, or separately managed account product. But we'll dive into that in episode 3. So for now, let's kick this off. Matt, we're going to go into DAC FP, right? That certificate program. So before we dive into some of the content, maybe provide us a brief overview of what the DAC FP certificate is.
Yeah, so I think you alluded to it already. This is a certificate in digital assets. And so it was founded by Rick Edelman. And as you also said, it was originally RIADAC, or the RIA Digital Asset Council. And it was changed to change the scope. So it's not just advisors, it's financial professionals. It could be brokers or insurance folks. So people that are in the financial services industry. So that's who this is catering to. And so Rick Edelman had the idea, I think back in 2017 or 2016. There's actually a history here on their website. You can go and read about it. And he was thinking about some of the things that we've already talked about, how to incorporate this into your practice, how to talk to clients about this. And so, yeah, you can see some of the folks that were here at some of these original meetings: Matt Haugen from Bitwise, Kathy Wood from ARC, or some of the more notable folks there that you probably recognize, Jack Tater and some other folks. So, and then from this meeting in 2018, right, Rick started crafting the ideas around the certificate and brought in some other folks, Don and some of the folks at RIADAC DAC-FP that we've worked with over the last year and a half. So, and then that's led to the certificate. So let's get started.
Yeah, well, I like that because we're kind of the OGs of this program, right? Like we were one of the first ones to complete it, and we'll kind of go over the certificate. So it was originally called RIADAC, and I think they did a little bit of a rebranding. But yeah, understanding the team and who they brought together was really important for us when we were looking at the landscape. So let's use that as it. And I think one important thing logistically for the program is that you'll see difference from maybe the CDA specifically is that the DAC-FP is a certificate program. It is not a designation. It's not recognized by any regulatory body. But that's okay, right? Like certifications, and that's kind of, there's this new way I think credentialing is moving towards, but this is part of that. So it is a certificate. There are no letters next to your name that you put in, but you can put it into your LinkedIn. But I thought that was important distinction about the program. So let's kind of talk, let's dive in. Let's talk a little bit about, and this is all public information on their website that you can see. And for those watching on YouTube, we're going to kind of run through the website while we go through this, but then for those listening, we'll try to make it as concise as possible. But let's take it through it. The program itself it offers continuing education credits, which I think is a really important piece too. 13 total. So if you have, your CFP, CPWA, CIMA, CIMC, or any of those with the investments, the IWI, you can get CE credits for taking this program, which I think is huge. So that's an important distinction as well. And then it's broken up in 3 major sections. And so we're going to go through the first 3. So let's go through part 1. So Matt, take us through part 1. Where do we start? What did you think about it?
Yeah. So it starts off right with, as you can see there, module 1 is Bitcoin, and Rick goes and discusses, how it was introduced, the concepts around it. And so it really helps set the foundation. And if you're coming into digital assets and you don't have a deep understanding or a deep foundation, this really helps create that for you, because it starts off, it's not super technical, it's not super heavy on the language, and it does a great job of saying why blockchain, why Bitcoin. And obviously Bitcoin was the first. The second one there with module 2, Scott Stornetta, who's definitely one of the probably the most influential and pivotal people in all of blockchain technology, referenced 3 times in the original white paper with his partner Stuart Haber. He talks about what makes blockchain so unique, and I think that's really important, because people say, we've got the internet, we've got technology, but really having a fundamental understanding of what blockchain technology is really important to set the foundation for not just understanding Bitcoin and Ethereum, but all digital assets and digital currencies. So that to me was really good I've been investing in digital assets for quite some time personally. And so this was a lot of review, but it was really good to just kind of reinforce some of the things. And I actually went through a program through Columbia University, and Scott Stornetta was one of the guest instructors there. So I've had classes from him in the past, but really good, really important to set the foundation. So if you're coming in and you're brand new to digital assets, this really helps you get started right out of the gate.
Yeah. And a couple of things I guess I'll add on to that is, especially, and Rick says this in one of the first modules, is like, if you come in with almost a closed mind and you come in with your traditional financial background and you try applying everything you've learned, you're actually starting off from behind, because this space, and this is an emerging technology, you have to make sure you keep an open mind. And I feel that, especially in this first segment, which is part one, understanding just digital assets and blockchain, it takes away a lot of that hype, and it takes away a lot of that, just that inspirational, just, oh my gosh, I got to get in, or those feelings, and puts in those disciplined thought processes around. And that's where I think the diversity and thought around the different instructors they have was a huge benefit in helping set that foundation, because you're not just hearing from one person, you're hearing from the founders of this type of technology. And it was interesting learning that, and again, once you start going down the rabbit hole of blockchain, you quickly realize that, blockchain is not a new idea, right? The distributed ledger technology has been tried to develop for a long time now. And again, Stornetta and his partner that you mentioned have been huge influencers in the space. But yeah, so I love this first section. So the first section really is just about getting that foundational understanding, right? What is Bitcoin? The second layers, protocols, tokens, and also DeFi, decentralized finance. And then you get Shauna Hoffman from IBM. She comes in and talks a lot about kind of the real world use cases right now. And again, going beyond just the hype of the assets, really separating the technology and the networks with the assets to really what is the technology and the networks doing, right?
Yeah, and it does a good job of kind of something that I think doesn't get talked about enough, is understanding the difference between open, permissionless public blockchains, which have real world use cases. And then there's also these kind of private or permission blockchains. And a lot of times they get kind of a bad rap because of, well, I'll be honest, because of Ripple or some of these other ones, but I'm not here, to talk bad about any of them, but it talks about other use cases, right? There could be a reason to have a controlled, permissioned DLT, distributed ledger technology, or permission blockchain for businesses to use and interact with each other that doesn't need to have the public on it. And so I think they do get into that a little bit, and it's important to understand the difference between the two, of what a public, open, permissionless blockchain is versus a private, permissioned blockchain. They both have valid use cases. And so it kind of sets the tone to differentiate that. And Mark, I want to go back to one thing you said, because it's something that is really, really important. And yeah, Rick does a good job of it. And even saying that if you're coming into this with tons of credentials and certifications, and you've been in the financial services industry for 30 years, you might actually be at a disadvantage to this. And so what that means is, like, come to this, set everything aside that you think you know or have heard on YouTube or in the media, and just put it away. Come to this with an open mind and try to engage with this asset at that fundamental level, without all the stuff the filters that you're bringing. It's really important.
Yeah, and I think one thing we've heard, in a guest of the podcast and a friend of ours, Steve Sandusky, he made a really good point a long time ago, which we wholeheartedly agree with, is that you're talking, and when someone like Rick Edelman really can do that, set aside what you just talked about, as someone who's built his entire career and success on traditional financial infrastructure, and especially in the RA space, obviously as one of the leaders, he was able to do that, and it speaks volumes to hearing that from someone like that, who actually practiced what he said and didn't just. And I thought that was really influential for me, as someone who who's a little bit younger, been in the space not quite 10 years, helping people in an advisory capacity. It meant a lot. And so I think a lot of people perk up and listen when someone has actually practiced what they've said. So that was really big. But yeah, so the first section of the program is all catered towards that, setting that foundation, right, of the technology, of the networks, the use cases, and really not even talking about the assets all that much, right? They do talk a little bit about the foundational aspects of Bitcoin, but really it's kind of helping separate the assets from the technology itself. So one of the biggest parts of that. But then in part two, that's where you start incorporating digital assets, right, into your investment strategy. This is where I think they start to dive into the asset side of it. So Matt, take us
Yeah.
through, these first few modules and kind of what it dives into.
Sure. So once you have that foundation of understanding what these are, then you kind of can shift into, okay, well, how does this fit into a portfolio, right? What is the investment thesis for including these assets in a portfolio? So this was good. We went through this process already at Arbor, and we put it into an alternative strategy. And they do talk about that, like how should this be considered for a portfolio? And what is that investment thesis around it, right? Network effects and things like that. So I took a lot from this, right? Again, it was a little bit of review, but it was really good to see other people, industry leaders kind of reinforcing some of the things we've already been through. The biggest takeaway for me in the learning was on module 9 with regulation and taxes, because that was where I think there's still a lot of gray area and we need more clarification. And we're recording this here at the end of February, and we're hopeful that we'll get some clarification from the Biden administration in the coming weeks around unification from the different regulatory bodies. But no, I love this section. And you're going to go through this, right? And you might come to different conclusions of how to include this in your portfolio. So there's a diverse variety of opinions here around how to approach this, and as well as different investment vehicles, which they talk about in module 7.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love it. It starts off with that first module in this section is really around the investment thesis, right? And this is where a lot of narratives are spoken about. Is Bitcoin digital gold? And they heavily focus in this course on Bitcoin only, right? Which again is both a critique and okay for me right now as we're in these early stages of adoption.
Mm-hmm.
But really it kind of gives you the if you adhere to the Bitcoin replacing gold narrative, you can tend to try to evaluate and try to forecast what Bitcoin could be worth in that narrative. Inflation hedge, the scarcity, you learn about all of those things in terms of the asset itself, the tokenomics of Bitcoin, 21 million ever in existence, the halving cycles. You're going to learn about the assets and the tokenomics a little bit more specifically on Bitcoin, a little bit into Ethereum. But again, it's very honed in on those two. So if you're looking for that broader, you're not going to get it here. But really the book that it stems from, Jack Tartar, and he wrote with a couple other authors, which is Crypto Assets, the Innovative Investor's Guide to Bitcoin and Beyond. He's the leader of this first module. So really just helping you think about what investment thesis and how would this fit into a traditional portfolio. And for us, it really came down to these are emerging technologies. This is like early stage investing here. So we're going to approach it that way, right?
And I'm picking up on what we talked about in the first one. The first section is having that open mind, right? This again evolves that, and it's really important because these digital assets evolve and change so quickly. And they talk about what is the investment thesis. Mark, you just alluded to it. Like, what is Bitcoin? What is its investment thesis? Is it digital gold? Is it a store of value? Is it a cashless peer-to-peer money transfer? Right? Is it the most secure network that's ever been invented? What are its actual use cases? And so again, going back to the open mind, you need to be prepared to evolve as this technology evolves. Because one of the things that I think they allude to in some of the first sections is this is software, right? Mm-hmm. This is programmable money or programmable blockchains, right? That can change and evolve over time. And your investment theses need to evolve and adapt to that as they change. And they don't get into it a lot here because, again, this is kind of setting the foundational work for how to incorporate it and just having that basic understanding of what the earliest and still relevant use cases of Bitcoin are for people.
Yeah, absolutely. And so then it goes into the next module, which is investment opportunities, where it goes into the different type of structures. There's the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust, the private funds, hedge funds. There's SMAs like us, and then there's what's coming hopefully in the ETF. Rick has this joke where it's like he always says an ETF is 18 months out, and that's been 3 years running now. Really funny.
Well, we have a futures ETF.
We
right
had
now.
we got
It's
a
live
future
in this
yeah.
country. Canada has, other countries have,
Many other countries do, yeah.
spot settled Bitcoin, but not us yet. So.
Yeah, there's countries right now, and again, I think what will probably be updated is, there's a lot of spot ETFs in many different countries, not just in Bitcoin and Ethereum, but they're starting to move into DeFi and
Right.
decentralized finance, and to these other tokens like Uniswap or Aave, Compound, Maker. So those are coming quickly, and just the US is a little bit behind right now. But really, then Rick goes into after. Ray Sclafani goes into investment opportunities, and then you got Rick, he goes into then constructing a portfolio with digital assets, which is great. Again, how does it fit in? He's the creator of the 1% rule, and that's kind of what you get here. The 1% rule to Bitcoin kind of goes into all those traditional metrics we're used to using, Sharpe, Sortino, and other risk ratios, as well as the, return characteristics and, how it fits within a 60-40 portfolio. So really important pieces in terms of portfolio construction. And then after that, it goes into module 9, which Matt, you alluded to, which was the really heavy one. And especially for me too, regulation and taxes. And, Dale Wright Jr., I hadn't really seen much of his work before this, and it really just opened my eyes, and really how he approaches, and not just him, but, how others are seeing as well. And just seeing the different, because this is a global asset. And that's where I think Dell does a great job in highlighting the global aspect of Bitcoin and digital assets, and kind of goes into the different geographic areas and how they're approaching it, and kind of goes through all of that. So that was a big learning for me, and especially for financial advisors who operate mainly in the US, it's easy to kind of get stuck within our four walls, but Dell does a great job in opening your minds. Did you take away that as well from this section?
I did, Mark. And you bring up a good point. Like, we have our American lens bias, right? That we focus everything through, including Bitcoin and even regulation and taxes. And other countries are going to have a different approach. And going back to those use cases, it's going to be more important in other countries, different use cases of these assets. And so, I did take that away. It was definitely more global, mindset from Dell in terms of how to think about these assets. And then I actually connected with him, I think, on LinkedIn, and he's a Barcelona fan, so we've got that in common.
Nice.
Had to get that in there. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, you have to. Sorry, we'll try not to derail the conversation with football talk, or European football talk. I'm sorry for any of my American football fans. But yeah, so that was a really big section for me. I love that section. It helped me communicate better too, and I think he does a great job just in the language and the communication of those pieces. And then I know module 10 then goes into the operations, compliance, and risk section, which I know is your favorite section, being compliance officer. So tell me a little bit what you took away from this section.
Yeah, I took away that, again, a lot of this was review for us, but it was good, again, to see other people, doing the homework and doing the due diligence around the asset class from it. But it's important from a business standpoint. If you do say, okay, we are going to allocate that. Well, how, right? And some of the how goes back to which investment vehicles you're going to use. And then you need to set up the internal policy procedures, right? You need to do all the due diligence around compliance, especially on the custodial side, because that's, massively important here. And so those are some of the biggest takeaways for me, is just really hammering home how just important the security is, and having a buttoned up and tightened up compliance department, and understanding the custodial risks and what they go through, right? Something that we've been through with Gemini, looking at the reports and the audits that they generate. And so, where you need to, that to me, I think is probably going to be a big eye opener for a lot of folks, because it's like, most traditional advisory firms, you're going to partner with Schwab or Vanguard or Fidelity, and, they're working with 10,000 other advisors, and, their compliance program's pretty standard, and you're going to digest the documents. This is new, right? If you're going to use Gemini or somebody else as a custodian, there's a lot of work that has to get done, and frankly hasn't, you're still kind of trailblazing. So it was good to get some reinforcements from this module.
Yeah, I think I took away from this section, because I don't live in the compliance space wholeheartedly like you do, but getting the different perspectives from lawyers, from non-financial minds, but who do have that kind of interweave in and have worked in financial services in those capacities, was really eye-opening. The communication was really important, the language they used. And again, these are just disciplined voices. They don't have an opinion on, is this asset going to go up or down? It's more just about the infrastructure establishment. And I think I came away, wow, we are still so early. If there's one section
Mhm.
that you're going to walk away with and understand really just truly how early you still are, but you wouldn't know it if you just listen to headlines, is this module 10, operations, compliance, and risk. Because there's just the standards are still being built in every shape and form. The standards are not
Yep.
created. And so if you get engaged, and what I took away with it is, you are going to be developing the standards along with everybody else who's working in this space. So it was a really eye-opening section. So I really enjoyed that. And then it ends off. The final module is just, you get to hear a lot from Rick. It's he calls it a bonus content, and
Mhm.
it's really just about how to talk about digital assets, answer some of the FUD, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And for me, I'm a big one of the best things about being an advisor is really just being able to connect and talk with people. I love that aspect of it. Um, and Rick does a great job in just how do you incorporate it, and gives like actual, established strategies of communication, for the different types of communicators that you are. So I thought that was a really good addition to the program. Did you take anything away from that, Matt? That's the last section.
Yeah, no, that was exactly what, Rick's very passionate about, get off zero, 1% allocation, but then he just talks about how to engage with clients, and how to speak the language that suits you and your particular relationship with each client. Yeah, it was good.
Yeah. Well, that's the content. So now I'd like to go over kind of, Matt, like just the learning experience, right? What was it like, and I guess I'll kick it
Yeah.
off by saying that, this experience was really, if you're listening to this, when you sign up for this certificate program, this is strictly, you watch videos and you take notes and you take an exam after, and then there's an end exam. There's no interaction. It's really just done at your own pace, right? You can
Mhm.
bang this out in a weekend. Or not. It's not meant to be that taxing. But I'd like to kick it off there. Like, it's just strictly watch videos, take notes, and take your tests. So tell
Yeah,
us, what did you think of that learning experience, Matt?
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. Like you said, it's self-paced. So yeah, you can binge watch it like a Netflix series if you want, all in one weekend, or you can space it out over time, which I would probably recommend, just so you can kind of sit back and sink in and absorb it. But there's a few takeaways and articles that you can read that he links to, which are super important to help further the understanding of what this is. So I would really recommend that. Don't just blaze through it and then click the
Mhm.
links and take the short quizzes, but actually go back and contemplate the articles and the links that are in each module, because it's really important to develop that deeper understanding. This
Mhm.
isn't, you're right, you're just banging on getting some CEs done and just finishing it. So you really need to be intentional with it. In terms of the experience for me, yeah, it was good. It was very polished, very professional, right? Very high caliber quality of delivery of the program itself.
Mhm.
Um, One of the things that I think you alluded to, it's like there's not a lot of opportunity for interaction though with the advisors. Rick does have, you can ask him questions like through the website and things like that, but there's no live session and there's not a ton of community engagement to
Mhm.
engage with your fellow cohorts in the class.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, yeah, it's very self-paced. It's very just, if you're the type of learner who likes to learn as an individual and doesn't really care for that, this is going to be right in your wheelhouse. But if you're
Mhm.
that learner likes to kind of get in, get your hands dirty, and you want that kind of instructor or someone or community to engage with, this is going to be a little bit rougher. And then the other thing I'll mention about the learning experience is, you mentioned it already, actually, is, and I just want to, it's very important to go through again, is don't rush through the content, right?
Mhm.
As someone who's taken, 4 or 5 different traditional industry exams and credentials and designations, um, a lot of times they're so big, the programs are so big that, if you start in 1 month and then you've gone through some of those beginning ones, you're honestly forgetting it. And then the questions, when you get to the questions, and that's really how you relearn and re-engage. And then when you're preparing for the exams, so it's almost like you get through the content to get to the questions and the practice exams and all that stuff to get you ready, right?
Mhm.
um, I would say it's the little bit of the opposite here, right? The exams are, again, are not meant to be a barrier. They're a lot easier than your traditional exams. And so I would highly recommend you take your time in the content, go through all of the resources, because within each module they do go through, like, so so if you're in investment thesis for digital assets, Jack Tartar is going to go over a few more resources within. Same thing in the first module, learning about the technology. There's so much more than just what they go through. So I'd really take your time in each module and really try to absorb and internalize, and don't just rush through the questions. And I would say that'd be the last thing on the learning experience. But let's go into a couple of the resources you get. So they have the yellow pages, right? So if you go to the website, you can go to the DACFP yellow pages. So this is available to everyone. You don't need the certificate to get this, but huge resource. Definitely recommend you go through it. DACFP also does run a lot of events, webinars, in person. They've got their big one here in Austin, Texas coming up. And again, you can go to their video section on their website. Again, go re-listen to these if you haven't on the same time that you do. And I guess what I wanted to talk about now is just the what happens, what's the outcome, right? And so the outcome, Matt, just take us through, what's the certificate like? I got mine up here, but walk us through it.
Yeah. So you get issued through Credly a badge here. You can see that, you can share on LinkedIn and post it around. And it's a certificate. It's not necessarily a designation. So yeah, it looks like you earned yours on May 17th, about a year ago. So yeah, pretty straightforward, pretty cool.
Yeah. And then actually there's an update, which we're really excited. We just recently got an email. And so this is where the last part we want to go through is kind of the ongoing value of this program, right? And that you'll hear that it's different, from the CDA or others. And before, when we were recording this and we were getting ready for this episode, this actually wasn't available. So this is hot off the presses, which is they are adding 8 new modules to the course. So if you've already gotten your DACFP, you actually get this for free. So this is a huge value add for if you've already gotten through the course and you've already paid the fee. If that's going to continue ongoing, this is going to pay for itself ongoing. And this space moves so fast. Honestly, we were thinking like, how are you going to keep up with this?
Right.
So I thought that was a big piece. Matt, anything you want to share on the ongoing?
Yeah, that's cool. I'm looking forward to seeing what they have in these next, modules that they're going to add on, because it'll be, as we said, right, this evolves so quickly, and, you're going to need to be updating. And I know they're going to, like this, and even the CDA that we'll talk about the next episode, like as this asset class moves, these organizations are going to have to move just as fast to keep up, right? NFTs and all the other things, and how, what's been in the news over the last year that wasn't maybe talked about when you went through this almost a year ago, and same for me. So this is really important to be able to continue to add onto it. So
yeah, well, that's our review. I guess some final thoughts are, for me, I do wish there was a bit more community, a little more engagement, especially the ethos of decentralization and crypto and digital assets. I think it's a very collaborative space. It's so new, it's emerging, that kind of, even if you're a competitor in the space, it's almost like everyone's building towards the same goal. And that's just to push this forward in a responsible way. So I do wish there was a little bit more community engagement. I do know that they, after talking with Don and Rick, Rick's been on the podcast with us, and obviously he's talked a lot about the program itself as well, and that they are working towards, some more community development. So we're excited for that to come. But Matt, what are your last thoughts before we get into the next episode?
Yeah, my final thoughts were, it was a really valuable course, even for me, right? I have a deep understanding of this, and a lot of it was review, but it was good to see other folks talk about things that we've already been through. But if you're coming fresh as a financial professional and have an open mind and are really curious about this is a really, really good way to kind of kick things off for you. Put aside the garbage you watched on YouTube or the FUD that you read about, and listen to the presenters, listen to Rick and what they're really saying about the traditional financial world and what this certificate is about, and what our whole Arbor Digital is about, and what this podcast is about. This is the next evolution of investing. Yes, it is you can make a little, portfolio pie, and this might be a little sliver, and that's fine. And if that's one of your takeaways, but that's just the start of this. And this provides a really, really good foundation for that. And I'm like, we just talked about, I'm really looking forward to the next ones that they're going to make live.
Mhm.
And as we will continue to stay engaged with DAC-FP, and we'll continue to use their resources, because it's really important for financial professionals to have these types of resources.
Yeah.
So yeah, I recommend it for everybody that's listening.
Thanks, Matt. And thank you for joining on this first episode. And the last thing I'll leave is just a big thank you to DAC-FP and the entire team over there, and everyone who's contributed to building that program, all the research and all the instructors. Again, the big thing that I'll say that I loved about that program was the diversity in thought and the diversity in intelligence and knowledge, right? Mm-hmm. You get to access, 15 different really important people that are specific to the technology, the assets in both traditional and the new worlds. And that's a huge benefit, right? That diversity. So if that's what you're looking for, go out there. Big thank you to Rick, the team, for taking on the responsibility of educating financial professionals. Yeah. And it can't be understated that anybody who's doing this needs to be given that kudos. So this is our way of saying thank you to them, and hopefully giving everyone a sneak peek into if they're on the fence of whether or not they should do it. But
go do it.
Yeah, exactly. Go do it. All right. Well, that wraps up episode 1. Thank you for joining today. Be sure to tap into episode 2, which we go into the CDAA. And please be sure to remember to tell somebody you care about them today. And we will see you on the next time on Asset Revolution. Thanks, everybody. We appreciate you listening to this edition of the Asset Revolution podcast. I'm your host, Mark Nichols. Please don't forget to let us know how you like the show by rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you like to listen. For more downloadable digital asset resources and educational opportunities, please visit us at arbordigital.io. We are here to help you get off zero safely and securely. Thanks again for tuning in, and be sure to tell someone you care about them. Cheers. Welcome to the Asset Revolution podcast, where each week your hosts from Arbor Digital provide educational opportunities for financial advisors and individual investors to gain knowledge in this emerging powerhouse that is digital asset investing. The Asset Revolution podcast is your connection to the future of digital assets and an opportunity for anyone to get off zero. Let's dive in.